they come as interns, they become innovators, and then they become entrepreneurs.
Wow.
So that journey from interns to innovators itself is a stepping stone, and then from innovators to entrepreneurs is the next stepping stone. Actually ended up becoming Trestle Labs.
Trestle Labs.
So Kibo is one of their products. Come from a place which produces the largest amount of onions in the world. You're all studying engineering. Why don't you solve this problem?
Yeah.
Right, that we have. And she took it as a challenge. And actually, she came to Digital Impact Square with this vision of saying, what can I do for agriculture? A team that's working on a very complex problem for tuberculosis. So there's a startup called Sense Dose Technologies that's incubated at Digital Impact Square. This is a challenge that is very, very deep in India. India has the world's largest number of tuberculosis patients. Today, they are one of the first startups that is actually providing a medical adherence platform for tuberculosis patients.
Yeah.
There's a need for enough attention on the students to make sure that they get the right kind of inspiration to pursue their education. 800 hours a year in non-teaching work.
Correct.
Right, filling up forms, doing scholarship, taking trips to doing these out-of-school children outreach and all of these things.
Welcome to the next episode of Pitch Cafe podcast with Digital Impact Square. We're calling this podcast Discovery with a Q. Discovery because we are going to the grassroots of India, finding what problems they're facing and coming up with amazing youth entrepreneurs and startups to solve the problem. Are you 18 years to 24 years old in this age group and you're itching to go and make a difference? You're very patriotic about your country. You want to build great technology to solve problems of massive scale. How do you go about doing this? Digital Impact Square is the place where you have some amazing mentorship for youth entrepreneurs to come and solve a problem in a very systematic way. This is not a typical startup ecosystem where you jump into the problem right away, but you take your time, do the right thing, and then, like the portfolio companies are making waves all over the world, you get to be one of them. So let's do a little bit of deep dive on what kind of startups Digital Impact Square is producing and what were these founders like when they were youth entrepreneurs, when they came to Digital Impact Square on day one. Let's get into these amazing stories. So, Bhanu, welcome again to the
Thank
second
you.
episode of Pitch Cafe podcast with Digital Impact Square. Tell us what these youth entrepreneurs are like when they come in all charged up to solve a social impact issue, and then how they transition to become mature, serious founders creating waves all over the world.
Yeah, this is a very important question because I think we have probably the largest number of graduates in the world,
Yes.
and all of these folks are buzzing with a lot of enthusiasm and energy. And as it would happen, a majority of these graduates who applied in the initial days of Digital Impact Square were engineering graduates.
Yeah.
So when an engineer thinks about a particular problem, they are most likely thinking of the solution first.
Yeah.
And they're thinking of what all tools they have learned, whether it is computer science, whether it's mechanical engineering, whether
Yeah.
it's electrical. They've tried to put all of those together and try to solve a problem right away.
Right.
And so this energy is very fresh in them when they come to Digital Impact Square. I would say that they are having some amount of passion and they want to stick to a particular problem, but they want to solve it their way.
Yeah.
Right, because they have already the tools and they understand the way to solve problems according to them. So this is the kind of energy that young innovators come to us. And typically when somebody comes to Digital Impact Square, they are in their final year, right, or just graduated. And from that stage onwards, what we call is they come as interns, they become innovators, and then they become entrepreneurs.
Wow.
So that journey from interns to innovators itself is a stepping stone, and then from innovators to entrepreneurs is the next stepping stone.
Yeah.
Right. For both these journeys are quite exciting.
Yeah, I had come to Digital Impact Square in 2017 and I asked a lot of questions and it was almost irritating so many people. I can imagine what interns can be like. So give us example of one of your favorite startups, what they were like when they were interns and innovators. How did they evolve into entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think it's a very difficult question to say favorite entrepreneur. One of the teams that I coached, for example, was called Kibo. Kibo eventually ended up becoming Trestle Labs.
Trestle Labs.
So Kibo is one of their products. So Bonnie Dave is one of the founders who came to Digital Impact Square. So again, a typical engineering student who came in their final year, to Digital Impact Square. So he came through this application process where there's an ideathon, there's a time when you actually have to code and build and demonstrate that you actually have the tools necessary to become an entrepreneur or an innovator. And he came through that process, and then he was given this challenge of working with making assistive. Let me put it this way: he was given the challenge of making spaces accessible for persons with disability. And it was interesting to map him to that project because he had a background in this field. So he is not your typical engineer, right? So in his final year, he chose a very unique problem to work on. Near his near his college, there is a blind people's association, and there's a blind school associated with it where he wanted to go and do volunteer work. And there he realized a problem of how students are struggling to learn and braille devices being very difficult to access.
Yeah, you can't clear an entrance exam with braille.
Yeah, and also even in primary education or secondary education, the content that is actually studied is on braille textbooks, so which are printed and kept there for a long time, and then they lose their tactile surface and all of that. So this Bonnie, what he did was he said, what if this braille system was refreshable? So he would use his mechanical engineering skills to build a refreshable braille display. And at that time, he volunteered for the school and he started delivering prototypes to these kids as small tests to see if they would enjoy it. And they really enjoyed it. And that created a spark in him that this is an area that he wants to work in. And graduating from a good college, he had all the options that he wanted to. He wanted to actually be in Boeing or Airbus and be an aerospace engineer. And then he got into Digital Impact Square. He had this option to choose from of get into a corporate job and pursue his dream of being in the aerospace field, or get into Digital Impact Square and solve this problem. And he took the plunge, right? So this is where character is sort of revealed, where you actually understand the personality of this person and prioritizing a social problem, which is uncertain, a lot of ambiguity involved. What will I do in my life in future? And then he took this plunge. And sometimes as Digital Impact Square, we feel this is the responsibility that we really have. When a young person who is putting their career at stake and trusting Digital Impact Square to actually pursue the dream of entrepreneurship or solving a problem, we have the responsibility to actually provide them with the utmost resources and support that is possible so that they can succeed. So we are sort of driven by this vision of making sure that we provide this support to them. Now, coming back to Bonnie came to us, and right up front, we recognized that he was not, just like any other. He was more measured, more calm, and willing to go back and take this discovery very seriously. And he, along with his team, went back and actually spent a lot of time with these ecosystem partners that we had, the National Association for the Blind and other stakeholders, experts, and actually went on to build a very successful startup along with Akshita and other members who were in the team at the time. So, and all of them had a similar story. Akshita, who is also the co-founder, came from a very similar background. In the engineering time, actually addressed these problems firsthand through whatever knowledge that she had at that time. And when these young people actually start expecting this solution to actually get deployed, one of these young kids in the school asked Didi, when will this innovation actually come? When can I buy this product? That's when she felt, that I am doing this as a project, but they are looking at it as potentially as a livelihood, as something that impact their life. And she wanted to commit herself to solving this problem. And as destiny would have it, she joined Bonnie and team and built Trestle Labs. Now they're very successful and they're actually very satisfied of creating the same impact that they visioned at some point.
Yeah, they were on Shark Tank, and she's visited Silicon Valley, getting a lot of interest from seasoned investors. So this is a journey from a student in a school, or a student who wants to serve the Blind Association, going all the way to Shark Tank or Silicon Valley. This is an amazing journey. So, okay, look, you talked about assistive tech. I know in Digital Impact Square, you're in healthcare. You're also working on agriculture and a few other verticals. So, talk about another founder from another vertical.
Yeah, another founder that comes to mind who is very inspiring for the youth who are probably listening to this is, say, Godam. Godam is a startup that works on how can you prevent post-harvest losses for Indian agriculture. And the founder of Godam is Kalyani. Kalyani comes from this typical tier 2, city in, or probably even beyond Nashik actually. She's come from a place which produces the largest amount of onions in the world, right, or in Asia, Lasalgaon. And there she has seen firsthand how her own family and relatives are undergoing this uncertainty that comes with harvesting onions and post harvest losses and all of that. And she and the family members used to tell, you're all studying engineering, why don't you solve this problem,
Yeah.
right, that we have. And she took it as a challenge, and actually she came to Digital Impact Square with this vision of saying, what can I do for agriculture, and especially within agriculture post harvest losses.
Yeah.
And because she was so close to the onion ecosystem, we let her address that challenge. And today she runs Godam. She's also sort of nicknamed as the Onion Queen because she's sitting on these policy boards, and she's young,
Oh
right?
my God.
Yeah, and
Okay.
she's helping the state governments share her experience of what happens on the ground and so on. So that transition you see from a young graduate
Yeah.
who comes sort of lost, I understand, I have a passion to solve a problem, to now being an authority almost on that subject,
Yeah.
and being able to guide so many other entrepreneurs and become sort of a role model for other
Yeah.
women entrepreneurs. I think all of this is very fascinating to see, very satisfying for us to see the
Yeah.
evolution of this individual. And we believe this kind of potential exists in the tier 2, tier 3 even more,
Yeah.
because these are the young individuals who are seeing these challenges firsthand.
Yeah.
They're experiencing this either in their own family or in their neighborhood, and they have the hunger and the desire to solve these problems.
Yeah.
All we are doing is providing them with that nurturing environment
Yeah.
where they can actually flourish.
This is amazing. So, I happen to do a podcast with another Digital Impact Square startup, the Backyard Creators. So they're doing hearing
Hearing,
implants
yeah.
for the children who are born with hearing disability. Now, what other startups in healthcare have you coached or mentored?
Right.
Like to share?
Yeah, Ram and Lakshman, great. I'm very happy that you met them. Wonderful two twins. So they do some fascinating work with hearing impaired. In fact, they're actually preventing implants because just imagine having implants and going through MRIs and not able to have a quality of life so they are building technology that can even avoid having implants on. Great. So in healthcare, I can also tell you about a team that's working on a very complex problem for tuberculosis. So there's a startup called Sense Dose Technologies that's incubated at Digital Impact Square. This is a challenge that is very, very deep in India. India has the world's largest number of tuberculosis patients, right? So and tuberculosis is a disease that actually has one of the highest mortality rates if right steps are not taken. And this is a team that is working in a complex environment like this.
Yeah.
And very, very determined folks who are actually going to work in a field like tuberculosis, because you have to work in a field where government officials are involved. The departments are not always the most supportive sometimes, right, for bringing about too much change in that field. And they are actually building solutions. Today, they are one of the first startups that is actually providing a medical adherence platform for tuberculosis patients.
Wow.
So as a TB patient gets diagnosed with tuberculosis, it usually starts with a drug sensitive tuberculosis. That means if you take medicines, your TB will actually improve. But the challenge is that after 3 months, the symptoms die down and patients stop taking medications thinking that they're free from TB.
Right.
And when that happens, the TB evolves to become a drug resistant TB. And that drug resistant TB is more difficult to combat.
Right.
So to prevent these patients from stopping taking their medication and taking their medication on time, a solution is required.
Right.
And government spends a lot of money and resources in making sure that medicines are taken on time.
Yeah.
And so the solution was to make sure that we get these the government resources deployed more efficiently. Exactly where these people are not taking the medication, only spend time in monitoring them. The rest of them who are already compliant don't need attention.
No, this is a key healthcare problem.
Right.
In digitizing healthcare, the problem is people don't update their status onto the digital platform.
Right.
So the healthcare data is very, very sporadical.
Right.
It's not as expected for us to process and gather insights.
Correct.
So you've solved that problem. It's a pretty big problem.
Right. Also, if you look at tuberculosis is what we would call a notifiable disease. That means the government of India has to be notified if you get a disease like this.
Right.
And we are operating within a lot of constraints. But the technology platform that the team has built is actually quite ready for any healthcare needs like you're mentioning.
Exactly.
Right. So, for example, in old age, right, in geriatric population, you can actually monitor remotely if they're taken the medication on time.
Yeah.
Right, and all of these solutions are very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So the team right now, as you were mentioning earlier, that this balance between purpose and profit.
Yeah.
The team is currently focusing on the purpose part of building impact in the tuberculosis area, but the platform is actually ready for scale even commercially.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of potential and opportunity there is with the technologies that the team has built.
Yeah, with a clear heart, you're solving a social problem, and when it is done right, it is scalable and it's
Yeah.
an extremely successful startup. Looks like that's the Digital Impact Square story.
Yeah.
So you talked about assistive tech, healthcare, and agriculture. There is one sector I cannot leave out. It's education. Tell us what your edtech startups are like.
Yeah, again, I'll give you an example of an edtech. See, education in India has the entire spectrum, right? So we have some
Yeah.
of the best education facilities and also some of these that require the most amount of impact and change. One such sector is the government education space, where if you are looking at, say, municipal corporation, which would happen in cities, and the Zilla Parishad schools, which would be mostly district level schools and more rural and tribal schools, these are places where there is a need for a teacher student ratio to be maintained right.
Yeah.
There's a need for enough attention on the students to make sure that they get the right kind of inspiration to pursue their education. All of these are very important, but more fundamentally, many of these students are also burdened with other livelihood issues, right?
Yeah, they have to go to
Financially,
work.
they
Yeah.
may have to go work, or they may have other pressures socially or at the family level. So they tend to be absent from school, right? And this is called out of school children. And India also happens to have one of the largest populations of out of school children, which is improving now. Over the last 6-7 years, definitely there's a lot of improvement. But this is a challenge that is currently prevalent in India, where the children are out of school. Now, what the government does is actually they invest a lot of resources in terms form of teachers and other academicians. They go to these homes and actually convince their parents to send their kids back.
Yeah.
Even the midday meals help to some extent, because that's also a motivation for sending the kids to school. Now, what happens in these schools is, for various reasons, children drop out or children avoid coming to school, get absent. Is there a way in which we can understand what is this pattern of absenteeism?
Yeah.
Can we prevent chronic absenteeism?
Yeah.
So that we can pull these children back into school and provide them with a continuous education.
Yeah.
So this startup started with this objective
Yeah.
of understanding chronic absenteeism and trying to prevent it.
Yeah.
And Sai, who is the founder of this Vidyaroha as a startup, worked with municipal corporation and Zilla Parishad schools. And you would be very surprised to note that in these schools, the moment photography, what they built as a very simple solution. They took a mobile phone app,
Yeah.
and they said, you just take a photograph. The teacher has to just take one photograph, and you'll be able to mark attendance for everybody who is there in that photograph.
Wow.
And they used advanced facial recognition technology, livelihood detection, and all of those things. And they're actually able to find out if somebody is, you're taking a photograph of a photograph, or you're actually taking photographs of live
Real one.
individuals.
Yeah.
And all of those things are captured in the system immediately, and attendance is marked instantaneously.
Wow.
A single teacher, for example, in a government school in India would spend about 800 hours. One school would
Taking
spend about
attendance.
800 hours a year in non-teaching work,
Correct.
right? Filling up forms, doing scholarship, taking trips to doing these out of school children outreach and all of these things. Now imagine if you were able to control this and make it much more targeted.
Yeah.
So what happens as a result of capturing attendance is all of these forms and all these details could also be filled automatically.
Yeah.
Right. So this is digitized. So this startup now has also found a cross utilization in skill development centers. So in ITIs and skill development centers, they also have a problem with attendance.
Yeah.
And many of these skill development centers happen outside. You can't have a swipe or a biometric there.
Yeah.
So taking a photograph and marking attendance became a viable option.
Yeah.
So they are able to now scale across 20 states in the skill development centers.
Wow.
Right, because this is not dependent on any on-premises infrastructure and so on.
This is amazing. I mean, of course, all educational institutions, training centers, everyone can use this. But this application has, I feel, it can be used in monitoring the crime scene in a city. Like they use CCTV cameras, several gigabytes of
Right.
recordings. But then if you have sporadic photography, you can do advanced face detection. It can be used for security and crime prevention also.
No, it's interesting that you bring up. There are a couple of things that I want to talk about, which I think are very powerful. So this startup, the education startup Vidyaroha, they ran a pilot last year for one of the districts with 80,000 children.
Wow.
So this is a huge educational establishment, right? So multiple Zilla Parishad schools. And now in each of these schools, they spotted chronic absenteeism at some point. And when they looked at the seasonality, the frequency, the combination of students that were actually absent, they found 5 of the girl children who were most likely going for child marriage.
Oh,
Right. So when they did the investigation, when the teachers would go out and
so
ask,
that's a social issue they
so
uncovered.
now you take an education problem which started off, and then now it has become a social problem, right? Social welfare. And now multiple departments are involved in actually trying to tackle that challenge. So it's a very powerful indicator,
Yeah.
whether it is child labor or whether it is child marriages and so on. So this impact goes far beyond the classroom,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So this is one example. Now the same startup was requested to be part of the elections process, where
Okay.
imagine now there are cameras that are placed outside election the booths.
Yeah.
Now you can actually use the same camera feed to detect how many people are there in the queue, at what rate is the queue moving, and how you should do the public outreach so that people can start coming in and voting, right?
Yeah.
Say that, by the way, if you come in now, you can wait for 15 minutes and your voting will be done.
Yeah.
So that will motivate people to come. If that uncertainty is there, that I don't know how long I have to wait, people may not come.
Yeah.
So a very simple technology. Now you see how the kind of use cases. On crime, actually, we actually have another startup. It's called Third Eye.
Mm-hmm.
So that startup actually works in the field of law enforcement.
Nice.
Yeah, at one time, this team got the Wiki Award because of their implementation for smart policing. And they have imaging-based solutions where they can study CCTV camera footage and actually spot movements like this that are suspicious, and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things I know about India is not only India, in many other parts of the world, is women are not safe in the dark. There are a lot of crime against women. I think Third Eye, and companies like that are going to be
Right.
very much valued by the government, because the government can prevent the women being getting into situations of threat or
Right.
be feeling unsafe.
Yeah.
So this is great. Looks like you are really creating a lot of impact with the digital technologies, a lot of
Yeah.
AI, a lot of advanced data driven approach you're using for making our cities better and safer. So kudos to you on that. On that note, I wanted to ask you, what is the future vision for Digital Impact Square? Where do you see yourself in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a very important point. So now we have spent since 2016, we spent about 8 years working in the model that we have talked about so far. In the last year or two, we are realizing that a majority of our startups who respond to our challenges come from either health and assistive tech or agriculture and education, right? So we want to create a vertical focus because there is enough volume and we are not able to cater to all the demand that there is. The Digital Impact Squares program, being philanthropic in nature and being very hands-on with a lot of coaching and mentoring support, is in a lot of demand. So
Yeah.
we are getting a lot of applications that we are not able to take all of the exciting work that they do.
Yeah.
So we want to actually create a dedicated focus for agriculture, for health and assistive tech, and for education, so that there is enough attention given to each of them. So instead of just say supporting 10, 12 teams today, what if we can support 10 teams in each of these verticals?
Right. Right.
So that kind of an ecosystem is what we are aspiring to create. Maybe the fastest moving and most recent work that's going to happen is in agriculture, where we'll set up Nashik as the hub for agriculture technology, so that they can actually build agriculture based startups and interventions there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So on that exciting note, I'm sure Digital Impact Square is going to go a long way. A lot of blessings from many stakeholders, including the Indian government, and now support coming from Silicon Valley in a lot of ways. Thank you so much for your time, and I really hope we can huddle together once again. Maybe bring on more mentors from your ecosystem to be part of this podcast. I know we just touched the surface on Spot Probe, grow and scale, the phases you mentioned. There is a lot more detailed work that happens when if an innovator comes to you with a problem, and we should uncover that in the next series of episodes.
Yeah.
And let's make it a true discovery
Sure.
for all our innovators. And
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the rest of our team also on a podcast.
Absolutely.
Samir, Sandeep, Akanksha, Vanita, Prachi, all of them I think should be on this podcast at some time.
Yeah, I'm just totally stoned here. The reason is I saw these kids in 2017, and the way they were so uncertain. I just saw them as school kids or college kids. I didn't see anything big coming out of them. Today they're winning awards and they're traveling several countries.
Yeah.
I saw the same kids then and now. I can't believe my eyes.
Right. I think the transformation is very, very satisfying. And as
Yeah.
you said, it definitely appears magical right now when you look
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're seeing the transition, right? It's
I'm
definitely
this there.
validation.
Yeah. Wonderful. On that note, thank you so much and love to have you guys back again. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.